Welcome to the Aging Well podcast. I'm Jeff Armstrong here with Corbin Bruton. In this and the episodes that follow, we will share candid discussions on aging and hear from the experts. We are here to inform and encourage as we experience, aging. Menopause is an issue for all women who are seeking to age well. In this episode, we are joined by Ann Garnier, the founder and CEO of Lisa Health. Ann is a champion of using technology, particularly artificial intelligence, to improve women's health care. Lisa Health's Midday app is a game changer in supporting women's health during menopause and helping women find the right support and interventions to manage symptoms and to promote aging well. So, Ann, let's begin by having you tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Well, I've been a senior executive in healthcare technology, helping to start and grow a number of venture-backed startups across my career. And my interest has always been in using advanced technology to improve patient outcomes and access to care. And along the way, I led the development of several tech-enabled women's health products and services, including for conditions like high-risk pregnancy, preterm birth, and fertility. So when I decided to start my own company and I was thinking about what problem I wanted to solve, I just kept going back to that passion for women's health. But I had really moved past my reproductive years. And what was interesting to me is what's happening to women's health after 40, which, we know is one of the most underserved areas of healthcare. So it was really a funny sort of thing that happened. I was researching, opportunities in the market for midlife women's health. And it just coincided with my own menopause transition. So even though I'm this incredibly knowledgeable and empowered healthcare consumer, like most women, I just felt really blindsided and, had that typical disappointing doctor visit. So, it hit home to me that if it's this hard for me and I'm this like super knowledgeable and empowered healthcare consumer, like what is this like for the average woman? So I really became passionate about using the latest technologies, things like artificial intelligence to transform this menopause journey for women worldwide. These and other technologies are improving outcomes for so many conditions. So the question I always ask is, why should 3.8 billion women be left behind to suffer in silence and figure out things on their own? So I started Lisa Health, the first digital health company using deep tech to really revolutionize this menopause and healthy aging journey for women.
So, according to Women's Health Org, you are serious about advancing research beyond pregnancy and fertility to reduce the serious and costly health risks that women face as they age. In our podcast, we are all about helping people age well. So, let's dive into that a little bit. What are some of the health risks women face, and is there anything that we can do to prevent this with exercise and diet alone?
Sure. Well, shocking statistic, at least from my point of view, but by age 55, 80% of women have at least one chronic disease and 50% have two. I mean, that to me is incredibly alarming and something, we should be ringing the alarm bells worldwide about this. And so from my point of view, menopause is this really perfect opportunity. So like starting in the perimenopause phase to really help women understand what their unique health risks are and put them on a path to healthy aging. So let's start introducing preventative care much earlier. We know now that some of the symptoms of menopause are actually linked to chronic disease, right? So they found, for example, a link between hot flashes, which 80% of women will have for 7 to 9 years, and cardiovascular disease, right? So why not use menopause as the perfect opportunity to change the trajectory of women's health and help them age well? So instead of, having a situation where the horse is already out of the barn, right? You already have a chronic condition and now you're trying to manage that condition, maybe through medication or maybe through lifestyle or a combination of those things. why don't we start much earlier to prevent chronic disease in women? And much of it, as we now know, because virtually every medical expert will tell you that lifestyle moves the needle, right? Healthy diet, exercise, if you don't smoke, all the things that you probably talk about on your show are applicable to midlife women.
I teach a pathophysiology and exercise class, and I try and harp on the fact that don't smoke, maintain a healthy body composition, exercise, diet, and get sleep. And those are the four things that you can do to prevent the majority of diseases.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, there's a bit of a taboo around talking about menopause. Men in particular, I think we just want to kind of stand back and say, no, we don't want to talk about it. No, we don't need it. But you recently presented a seminar, Breaking the Taboo. I think it was called Menopause Cafe, where science and action intersect. First of all, is that recorded somewhere where our listeners might be able to access that content?
I can check. And if you have any notes you provide in your podcast, happy to send that link over.
Yeah, so if we can find that, we'll add that to the content notes.
Sure.
But since we don't hear much about menopause, or at least as much as we should, and it does have a dramatic effect on the woman's body. So kind of let's talk about that taboo subject a little bit, some of the challenges that women may face, and maybe how do we combat that, and how early do we start really talking about menopause so that we can counter these things that you were talking about?
Sure. Well, if you had talked to me maybe 12 or 18 months ago, I would have agreed 100%. Menopause is still in the closet. Nobody wants to talk about it. There's still a lot of shame and silence around menopause. But I think thanks to the younger generations who have started talking much more openly about, say, menstrual health, their reproductive health, sexual wellness, women in midlife and who are in this menopause life stage. And I call it a life stage because, it starts with perimenopause in your late 30s or early 40s, and then you transition to menopause typically between the ages of 45 to 55. And then you're menopausal for the rest of your life. So I think women in the menopause life stage now are feeling much more confident about talking openly. And I've been hearing more and more reports from people who say that it's coming up at dinner parties, we're in mixed company, in the workplace, over drinks. Not a week goes by where a major publication like the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal or Washington Post, doesn't have an article about this topic. So I think we are seeing much more conversation. We still aren't quite there yet, but I'm really, really encouraged by the signs that we're seeing over the last 12 or so months. Really, really excited about that. And I encourage all women to talk openly and to talk with their partners, their families. We've always said that's part of, should be part of the early sort of phase of this journey is, don't try to hide what's happening, from, the people in your life, but sort of share openly what's happening and sort of walk this path together because you do need a lot of support. So I think you had another question in there about, you may have to cue me again, about when we should start talking about it.
Yeah, that was the second part.
Yeah. So, I have the, opportunity to speak with, many, many medical experts, top people in the field of women's health. And, I think we all agree that, we should start talking about it really early. At least in, women's 20s or 30s at the very latest, because symptoms can start in your late 30s. And oftentimes women think it's something else, right? So they are not able to get the support they need because, they're tying it back to being, say, oh, I'm just too busy, right? That's why my sleep is disrupted. So they're not able to get sort of the personalized help that I think most women would benefit. But there is for about 1% of women, which is not actually a trivial number, premature menopause. And so that can happen, before your 40s or your late 30s, right? And that can have some devastating health consequences for women in terms of putting them at higher risk of bone issues, cardiovascular issues. So I think it's important for women to understand really early in life, right? All of the transitional stages they're going to go through, and not just, you're going to get your first period, and here's the talk about sex to, prepare you for, your first sexual encounter, to, preparing you for having a baby, right? You need to know what's coming next, because, the earlier you invest in your health, right? Invest particularly from a lifestyle perspective, potentially the smoother your menopause journey will be, and it'll happen in a time frame that's more desirable. So you really ideally want to experience the menopause transition, you know, as late as possible, right? So that you have the protective benefits of estrogen, which are protective for your health. I'm sorry, for your heart, for your bones, for your brain. I mean, for so many parts of our body, estrogen is really, really critical.
Yeah, and that's a general theme on this podcast is, we tend to talk about aging once we're aging, but we want
Right.
people to recognize that successful aging starts at birth. And earlier we can start to educate, develop the habits and the things like that that are going to help us the better we age. And so it's the same with menopause, I assume.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Double down on all those healthy lifestyle
Yes.
behaviors. Double down.
Well, I'm kind of going off script here because you mentioned that women are hitting menopause at such a younger age. Is there a huge shift difference with at least I know with my generation compared to previous generations, where the previous generations were having babies at a lot younger age, but then my generation is more waiting to establish, their career and get um that financial fear of, oh no, am I going to be able to afford everything? How does that play a role with your research as far as, women wanting to have babies, but they're also hitting that menopause state a lot earlier than previously before?
Sure. So just to be clear, women aren't experiencing the menopause transition earlier.
Okay.
About 1% of women experience premature menopause, so before age 40. And then there's about 5% of women who go through what they call early natural menopause. So it's still natural menopause, but it's just a little earlier. And those are women between the ages of 40 and 44. But the vast majority of women will experience the menopause transition between age 45 and 55. And the average age of reaching menopause in the United States is age 51. Now, some women do reach menopause after the age of 55, but it's a pretty small percentage. So, no, there's not a trend that women are experiencing menopause earlier. But I do think it's important for women who maybe are deferring childbearing, for a variety of reasons, to understand that, they may be raising young children at the same time they're going through a transition, which creates a lot of change in not just your body, but also your mood. So anxiety and depression is fairly prevalent during this life stage, even if you never had a history of anxiety and depression. A good percentage of women will experience it, and it goes undetected. So, again, I mentioned, very early on, having these conversations with your partner, your children, if they're of the right age, parents, friends, um, because certainly the mood changes that you go through, right? And not just anxiety and depression, but irritability, the blues, all of this can impact the way that you are interacting with people in your life, including your children. And I would say it's not too infrequent that, a teenager or somebody maybe in their 20s will say, wow, mom is crazy. Well, it's really not fair to characterize it that way because mom is not crazy. But there's this perception, right? Because again, people aren't talking about it. So you just are like, wow, I don't know what's going on with mom. She's just acting crazy, right? And maybe your partner is hibernating, in the garage, right, for several years. And I think it just leads to an erosion of relationship when you could actually flip it and make your relationship stronger. I know for me and my husband, talking openly about what was happening to me, and him, digging in, doing some of his own research, and just generally being incredibly supportive, made our relationship so much stronger.
I discussed my epigenetics test with True Diagnostic co-founder Hannah Wendt in episode 162. Epigenetic testing measures baseline and changes in your pace of aging, giving you the power to steer your anti-aging or health and wellness journey in the right direction. I learned that I am aging well. Click on the affiliate link in the episode description, use the promo code AGEWELL, and receive a 12% discount on your epigenetics test and monitor your pace of aging.
So it looks like you're taking on the role to develop the AI sensory-based technology to detect biomarkers and deliver targeted therapeutics. This seems like a huge game changer. You want to dive into that a little bit more?
It is a game changer, and I'll tell you why. So this is an incredibly complex life stage. There are as many as 34 possible symptoms, maybe more. The number changes, seems to change from year to year, but generally the consensus is there's about 34 symptoms, right? And there's multiple stages of menopause. So you have perimenopause, which is broken into early and late, and you have the menopause sort of transition phase, which is that window of time where you're sort of waiting to see if you've gone 12 consecutive months without a period that's not due to something else. And then you have postmenopause. So think about it. These symptoms are going to change, throughout these stages. And every woman really is unique, right? We all are unique. Our physiology is different. Factors like ethnicity come into play. African American women will experience hot flashes of longer duration and more intensity than Caucasian women, for example. So if you really want to understand what's happening to a woman's body, to sort of get to that root cause level, right? And then to deliver the personalized support that she deserves, you really need to use technologies like artificial intelligence that is very, very good at taking, large amounts of data. And sort of, I'll just kind of make it sound a little bit more basic, but, sort of sifting through that, to be able to pinpoint what is happening with a woman's body and really then share those insights with her, right? Because today, if you go to your doctor, very few doctors are actually trained in menopausal care, less than 20%. And so most women will not engage with a healthcare clinician that has a good understanding or grasp of menopause. And most women walk away from those encounters feeling pretty disappointed and left on their own to figure things out. So if you go to your doctor, you're likely to feel like you're not, you're not getting the support. And then women go on this years long cycle of trial and error, just trying anything, right? Whatever they read on Facebook or, friends tell them works for them. And oftentimes not getting relief. So they end up sort of settling for, I think, less than what they deserve from a health and well-being perspective during this life stage. So why not harness the power of technology? Because we're using it for virtually every other condition to generate insights. So assessing your breast cancer risk or understanding things about your cardiovascular status. So why not, apply this technology to life stage that half the people on the planet at some point in time are going to experience. it seems to me that it's a worthy use of technology.
Well, it seems almost groundbreaking, honestly, and it
It is.
probably was a lot of work to develop. So, how long did it take you to navigate this ship of success?
Well, I always take this sort of tech-enabled approach to solving healthcare problems. It's not the only way to solve a healthcare problem, but I think as technology is getting better and better, it becomes critical, particularly in a situation where you don't have very many trained clinicians. So it's a perfect use case for technology and digital health to sort of bridge that gap. Which, by the way, clinicians actually really love because, even the experts will say they don't have the time or even all of the tools that women need to manage this life stage. But I think it's game changing, when you think about, for example, we have technology that can detect and predict hot flashes with 90% accuracy in real time, right? So you take a symptom that 80% of women will have for 7 to 9 years. It's highly unpredictable, quite bothersome, debilitating for some. And now you turn it into a symptom that can be predicted and managed, right? Just think like I don't have to be afraid that I'm going to be in a meeting, right, doing a big presentation and have a hot flash, or in a social event, or just generally being really, really uncomfortable or having my sleep disturbed. Now I have the predictability of what's happening with my body, and I have the tools to manage it and measure, the efficacy of these therapeutic options, right? So I think it is game changing when we can really isolate these different symptoms and help women better manage them. We've been working on, several of these algorithms with SRI International. So my co-founder is principal scientist at SRI, and he's led much of the groundbreaking research around menopause, specifically sleep disturbance, hot flashes, menstrual cycle irregularity. And so he's been doing this for about 10 years. So, this is research that has been grounded in science and a gold standard lab environment with, top scientists and technologists who've been working on it.
And all that's reflected in the Midday app.
So many of the features that are in the app are based on technologies that we've been developing for a while. We don't have today our hot flash algorithm in the app. That is coming soon. But we're continuing to add new feature and functionality to the app all the time, and it's getting better and better at personalizing the experience for women.
So let's talk about the Midday app a little bit.
Sure.
What is it, and where can our listeners go and get it?
Okay. Well, they can download it from the App Store. It's currently available on iOS, and we'll have an Android version available in 2023. So we're not leaving out the Android users. They can also visit us at midday.health, midday.health, just to learn more. And then there's links there to download the app from the App Store. So Midday is an app that's, as I mentioned, a few times in the podcast, it's leveraging advanced technology, specifically artificial intelligence. But we also have the ability to connect your wearable, for example, a Fitbit, so that you have all of your data in one place, and then we can deliver insights and support that is more contextualized for your midlife stage than perhaps you're getting through your conventional wearable app. And then I think most importantly, in addition to insights, we're actually delivering, targeted therapeutic support for relief. And we offer a very broad range because what we've heard from women over and over again is that they want choice. There's certainly an opportunity to use other companies' products, but it tends to sort of put you on this path to maybe one or two therapeutic options when women really want to know, the broad range of options that are available. starting with holistic and alternative and complementary medicine. So, for example, hypnotherapy, meditation, yoga, paced respiration, what's available for a given symptom that might be on that end of the spectrum. And then all the way to the other end of the spectrum, having an opportunity to engage with a menopause expert through virtual care and exploring prescription options like menopausal hormone therapy. So women want a broad range. They want to know what all of the options are. And so that's part of the value proposition, is that we offer that full continuum, and we're not biasing women towards any particular therapeutic strategy, but really the right one for them.
Wow. Thank you. Would you be willing to dive a little bit into the algorithm that the app uses to monitor the hormone balance?
So we're not monitoring hormone balance. So there are quite a few companies out there that are marketing tests, to measure your hormones and to understand where you're at in the menopause life stage. But the experts will tell you that those tests are not very good, and that women shouldn't waste their money. So particularly in the menopause life stage, your hormones are quite erratic throughout the day, not just from day to day or week to week, but throughout the day. So that makes measuring hormone levels very challenging.
So with the Midday website, it says that one can get education and resources that you can trust. What are some examples of where the information is sourced?
So we work with experts to develop our educational content, and that depending on the topic, that could range from a registered dietitian to a pelvic floor physical therapist to a menopause expert who's either a nurse or a doctor. So depending on what the topic is, we try to find experts who can bring their knowledge and develop information that's evidence-based and science-backed. We also have a product marketplace. One of the things we heard from women over and over again is, I just want a one-stop shop. I'm super busy. I don't have time to go out and research. What do I do for hot flashes? What do I do for vaginal dryness? What do I do for bone health? They just really wanted it all curated in one platform, and that's what we've done. So we've got a product marketplace feature where we've curated, some of the top menopausal brands. So that's one of the things I'm kind of excited about over the last few years, is that there's been a lot of companies who've come in to the space who have developed solutions that are really targeting women 40 and up, right? And if you talk to some of the women who've started these companies and their former executives from top brands, they'll say, I'd be sitting there in a meeting, talking about thinning hair, and we're developing products for 20 and 30-year-olds. We're not developing products for women who are like 40, 50, 60, who are really experiencing, hair loss because of menopause. So I'm excited that we're able within the app to have curated, very high quality products to address a wide range of symptoms. Oftentimes a product is the first line therapeutic for many symptoms. Vaginal dryness is a really good example where, unless it's something else, typically vaginal dryness, the first recommendation is use an over-the-counter moisturizer and lubricant. And for many women, that can provide relief for a good amount of time. But again, this is where, things get interesting, where menopause gets complex. So as you move from perimenopause to postmenopause, you can expect that vaginal dryness will get much worse as you age. And so that first line over-the-counter moisturizer and lubricant may not work so well for you anymore. And so rather than avoiding, having sex, there are other options, right? So then you kind of level up to non-hormonal and hormonal options that can provide relief. And a lot of women aren't even aware that these options are available. They think, I either just have to grin and bear it, which, trust me, I'll tell you, not fun. or I have to close up shop. And if you're in a partner relationship, that oftentimes creates a lot of tension because the other person still wants that romantic, sexual relationship. And, I think maybe you guys know that the divorce rate's pretty high in this life stage. And I'm not saying that I'm pointing to the fact that women aren't willing to have sex, but, there's a lot of reasons, and that, um, you know, and I totally understand why women would avoid intimacy when it's so incredibly painful. But that can certainly be one of the drivers, is that, the relationship shifts from an intimacy perspective.
Well, we discuss a lot on this podcast, really the preventative aspects of aging well. And certainly you've already touched on a few things that women can do to kind of improve their kind of prognosis or their future with menopause. And we discuss a lot about exercise and the role of exercise at a young age, from a very young age, in order to affect, some of these side effects. Um, can you maybe touch on this a little bit about what you would share with women who are trying to age well?
Sure. So there's a few things, absolutely you've got to double down on exercise. Uh, if you're not moving, just meet yourself where you're at. Start moving a few minutes every day, just take a walk around the block. I don't want women to have the impression that, if they've not exercised or are in shape, that it's out of reach for them, because I think everyone just needs to start, at the place where they're at, and then just gradually increase their, time and exercise and intensity. So I think exercise will serve you well, because I would say the number one concern of most women in this life stage is weight gain. And they particularly complain about the belly fat, that kind of spare tire around the midsection. And a lot of women think that that is a menopause symptom. And weight gain in and of itself is not. That's just a function of aging. So you're not gaining weight because you're in menopause. It's just because you're getting older. What menopause is causing is that deposit of that visceral fat in the belly region, right? So it's a long way of saying, yes, absolutely establish good exercise behaviors as early as possible. But, if you haven't exercised in a while, or, you kind of maybe just exercising 1 or 2 days a week, you're going to have to really ramp that up. And don't shy away from, when you're ready, of tackling, like high intensity interval training and some things that are a little bit, maybe in your mind, like, wow, I'm too old for that. Like, no, you're not. And I can provide many, many examples of women in their 60s, 70s, 80s, even 90s, just rocking it and like competing in long distance bike races, marathons, triathlons, like you name it. And so take inspiration from that. I mean, I'm not going to go sign up for a triathlon, but it does inspire me to, do more intense exercise for longer periods of time. So it inspires me to have, loftier goals about what I can do at my age and what I'll be able to do in the future. Um, Certainly diet, huge part of this. Sugar, I would say number one, like try to reduce your sugar intake as much as possible, and not just from a function of weight, but a function of brain health as well. I think all of us have, consuming way too much sugar and just junk food, right? I mean, we should all enjoy our treats. I do, got the treat night, right? But you have to put it within that sort of context of it being a treat and not something that you're doing like every day, multiple times a day. So we try to sort of steer women towards a Mediterranean diet, at least a diet that's more plant forward, which does not mean vegetarian or vegan, because you do need a lot of protein as a woman as you're aging to build muscle mass. Muscle mass, actually, we lose that quite rapidly. And I don't think women understand that. I think when they hear protein, they think, oh, I'm going to bulk up, or I've got to go on that keto diet. No. You just need to make sure that you're balancing your diet so you're having, adequate intake of healthy proteins. So definitely watch the sugar, eat more plants, eat enough protein. I think sleep certainly is up there in the top three. Fortunately, we're just all getting a master class on sleep these days, because it's been so much in the forefront of the media. And we've got more apps and wearables who are focused on sleep. And women in this life stage have the most disturbed sleep or get the least amount of sleep of any other demographic. So if anybody should be paying attention to their sleep, it should be women over 40.
Now, why is that? Why are women getting less sleep than, say, us men?
Well, for many women, it's related to hot flashes. And I hear a lot from women, particularly in the earlier phases of their menopause journey. Oh, I'm not having hot flashes. And you go, okay. And then you tease it out and they go, oh, but I do sweat at night when I'm sleeping. And I wake up and I'm like all sweaty, and I have to go change my pajamas or my sheets or whatever. And it's like, well, night sweats actually is a hot flash that's happening at night. Why they sort of call it night sweats as opposed to just saying it's a straight up hot flash that just happens to have a sweating component, I don't know. I don't know the sort of the scientific origin of that. But if you are waking up at night and you are sweating, even if you feel like you're not having a hot flash, you are. And for a lot of women, it is that nighttime hot flash / night sweat activity that's disturbing their sleep big time. And so one of the things that we have been working on is the ability to understand that dynamic and to be able to illuminate that for women. Because it may not be hot flashes and night sweats. It actually could be sleep apnea. It could be clinical insomnia. And so what we want to do is really understand the root cause of the sleep disturbance so that we can treat it appropriately. Because you're going to treat somebody with clinical insomnia differently than you will someone whose sleep is disturbed by hot flashes.
And does your app kind of work with that to kind of track some of that data?
It does. Actually, if you connect your wearable, you'll get insights around your sleep in the app. So it's all in one place for women. They don't have to go check multiple apps. It's right there. And then, as I mentioned, we're working on an algorithm that gets more to the root cause of that sleep disturbance.
Nice. Sounds like everything you've been telling is underscoring what we teach here on Aging Well.
For sure, for sure.
Bedtime and all those types of things.
Yeah. And I would say probably the last thing for women's really specifically, and you probably do say this for everybody, but, more self-care, because women tend to be taking care of everybody else and neglecting themselves. And don't underestimate the power of stress and anxiety to fuel menopause symptoms. There is a link between, for example, hot flashes and stress and anxiety. So you're stressed out, you may be having more hot flashes and they may be more intense. So one of the features in the app is we help women understand what their triggers are of hot flashes. And so once we understand those triggers, then we can deliver targeted suggestions to them for managing those triggers. So it could be anxiety, it could be work stress, it could be red wine, it could be caffeine. There's probably a dozen or more well-known triggers of hot flashes. And I personally, even though I think I'm an expert in this space, using that feature in the app, found it to be very illuminating around the underlying causes of my hot flashes and then helped me to better manage them.
That's great. So you've kind of been touching on the fact that menopause is psychological and emotional as well as physical.
Absolutely.
And so what are some other tips that you might have to encourage somebody that's going through this change in order to, of course, age well, but also advice for the partner and perhaps for the child who might be witnessing this loved one going through these changes and these struggles?
Sure. Well, we can start with, partner, family, friends, and, please don't characterize women as being crazy. That's not helpful, right? It's not constructive. It's not helpful to be, even in a joking way, for somebody to say, wow, you're just off the rails or you're crazy. I think it's important to just sit down and have, an open, honest, empathetic conversation about what's happening. Uh, and if need be, um, support your female partner to get the help she needs, because not all women are able, or I don't know. I want to just make sure I'm saying this right, but I have seen many situations where it's the partner who will make the appointment with a menopause expert, um, because they see that their partner is suffering so much, from symptomatology. I know some women, there's about 15% of women who have very severe symptoms, to the extent that maybe it's interfering with their ability to complete their activities of daily living, to even get out of bed. Some women retire early. They leave work and retire early. A survey we did of about 4,000 women showed that about 10% actually exited the workforce because of their menopause symptoms. So, don't wait for your partner to go get help facilitate your partner getting help if that's what's needed. Um, yeah, I think that's sort of the sum of the partner advice. And then I think you asked first to some other tips for women.
Yeah, other tips, and even for the child. We mentioned earlier that with women having children maybe a little bit later,
Mhm.
their children are experiencing this a little bit earlier in life.
Sure. Well, it may be hard for adolescent children to really, kind of process and internalize, what's happening to mom. But I think if you're a teenager, or, you're in your 20s, or even older, again, understanding that, your mother's going through a lot of changes, and she may not always be herself, to not necessarily provoke her or, get into arguments, but just to be patient, and understanding that, maybe she might be a little bit more irritable today, but it doesn't mean that she's necessarily upset with you. A lot of times women, really struggle to control these mood swings. And yeah, so I think just be kind of chill about it.
Sounds like communication within the family is something that we all should work on
For
so that we
sure.
can help through those.
For sure. I mean, we all need to start talking more openly about what's happening, particularly as, parents are aging, uh, you know, and there might be younger children at home, right? And so, they might previously, kids might have encountered this when they were in their 30s and 40s, and now they might be encountering some of these things when they're in their teens and 20s. And men go through a lot of transition as well in midlife. So these kinds of conversations are not exclusive to women.
That's a habit that my wife and I have kind of instituted over the last few years, where we call it our 15-minute check-in.
Hmm.
That we've just been so busy. So we set aside 15 minutes every day to just kind of
Hmm.
sit down, talk about what's going on, maybe have a glass of wine. And the kids always complain because it usually spreads out into 45, 50 minutes, an
Sure.
hour or more. They try and join in a lot more, which we kind of welcome in as long as we have that 15 minutes.
Hmm.
But I find that to be a really good habit for us relationally as well as a family, just to stay connected so that we're not just passing by. And if something's bothering somebody, or you see somebody's kind of struggling with something, you should be able to kind of address it.
Absolutely. I think it's a great tip. Maybe I'll take that same page. I think my husband and I do check in pretty much every day, but
That's
we're not
great.
doing it as mindfully as you are.
So with that, one thing that we always ask of our interviews, since this is an Aging Well podcast, what are you doing to age well?
Well, I try to exercise every single day, and I've upped the ante. I remember I used to go past those rooms at the health club of, like, screaming people jumping up and down frantically. I would be like, "Whoa!" As I'm on my way to my Pilates or yoga class. But, at a certain point, I realized that if I didn't level up, I was going to be in that, kind of camp of putting weight on that I didn't want to put on. And, probably experiencing some downstream, chronic disease issues. So I just was like, okay, well, I'm going to give it a try. So just give it a try. And I do, or at least when I did go to the health club pre-pandemic, you oftentimes would see women come in and give it a try. Maybe they'd jump out after 15 or 20 minutes, or they'd never come back after one class. And I think it's just, you have to realize, like, just take it at your own pace. And if you give it 4 to 6 weeks, you'd be super surprised at how you're just going to rock it. Like, you will just continue to be able to do more and more. So give yourself a chance and don't put too much pressure on yourself. Eat a really healthy diet. I do have my treats. I do like my glass of red wine. But I make sure that I'm, eating food that is, coming out of the ground and, ideally, produced in a way that is, more friendly for our bodies and the environment. I know not everybody can afford that. So if you can't afford organic, just get regular vegetables, right? But make sure you're getting enough of that in your diet, and definitely cut out the sugar. And then I have tried to engage in more mindful, activities, right? Over the past several years, I think I've sort of dismissed a lot of that stuff as being sort of woo-woo, but they really work. They do. And so, you don't have to sit and try to meditate for 30 minutes. I mean, you can sit and just be quiet and reflective for like 60 seconds. And, so just start small. Our January campaign is always around one small change. And we really encourage people to, women to just not necessarily bite off more than they can chew. And then they feel bad about themselves. And they're like, oh, I'm a failure. And, why bother? Right. So they just, kind of go in the other direction and sort of, towards those unhealthy habits. But to just do one like really small thing and get that mastered and under your belt and feel good about it, and then go do one other small thing, right? And then gradually you're building this, wonderful set of behaviors that are just going to serve you into old age, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I think you guys are probably in the same camp.
Yeah. One of my favorite movies, and I've shared it with classes in the past, is kind of a teaching tool for that whole taking baby steps, is What About Bob, with Bill Murray.
Right.
It's a classic movie, him and Richard Dreyfuss. But, just that idea, just taking those small little changes, and they start to add up, they start to multiply. You don't have to change everything overnight.
Yeah, I mean, it could be as simple as, don't put sugar in your morning coffee, right? Believe me, after a couple of weeks, you won't miss it. It's maybe like, doesn't taste as good at first, but after a while, your taste buds change. You just have to give things a chance. And I'd also say, sort of in closing on this particular topic, is stop chasing, fads, the stuff you see on TikTok and Facebook, right? Drinking celery juice is not going to create sustainable weight loss. You're going to lose weight for about a minute, just enough to get into that dress for your daughter's wedding. And then it's going to come right back on, and probably more, because your body's just going to naturally want to overcorrect. So just stick with the tried and true. And, if that's the Mediterranean diet or Weight Watchers, those things are proven and they work, and just keep working the plan.
So you mentioned that you try and avoid the sweets and everything, but what is your one indulgence, your favorite thing you like to just this is my treat?
Probably red wine, which does have health benefits as long as it's in moderation. But I think that's the one thing that I, don't give up. I mean, I don't have to drink red wine every night, but, I do typically enjoy a glass with dinner. It's relaxing. It sort of helps this kind of mental transition from like a super busy day and, staring at the computer, being on Zoom, and your mind just racing to, okay, now I'm going to start making dinner, which I love to cook. And when you're cooking, you have to kind of pay attention to just what you're doing, right? And so you start that to wind down and to make that transition into hopefully an evening that doesn't involve going back to your phone and reading email or, any of that. I think if you're worried about your sleep, you're having trouble sleeping or in trouble winding down at night, I ask people, like, are you like checking your email before you go to bed? And there's nothing like an email from somebody at work to kind of set your mind sort of racing, or maybe even from a friend or family member, just something that, is not going to set you on a path to restful sleep.
One of my favorites is dark chocolate. Really, really
yeah.
dark chocolate. And it's an acquired taste.
I love it.
But it's got to have some health benefits, I would imagine, for women going through menopause as well.
Yeah, there's been some really small studies about super dark chocolate. Like, we're talking 80% or greater having some benefit for menopause symptoms. We wrote an article on it a while back. We like to do some fun pieces, and we know how much women like their chocolate. So again, if you have a sweet tooth, try to make that transition to super dark chocolate. I now don't like anything that's less than 80%. Like, it just tastes too sweet to me.
That's the same with me.
Yeah. Give your taste buds some credit for their ability to adapt and just your body and your mind, right? Anything, I believe, you can sort of make that shift depending on what it is, anywhere from 4 days to about 6 weeks.
Great.
Personally,
anything else to add to the conversation today?
Well, I'm super excited that you guys have embraced this topic for your podcast. I'm really hoping that more men, enable or facilitate this conversation, because I've said for several years now that, it's not just about women, feeling confident, to have this conversation about menopause and demand more and better support, but we need men to also be there right with us, shoulder to shoulder, supporting us. And also, men still make a lot of decisions, particularly in the workplace. And we know that menopause has a pretty big impact on women at work. And we're offering Midday as a program to employers to help women improve their menopause symptoms so that they can take more advantage of career opportunities, less likely to exit the workforce, and generally be more productive. But we're going to need, men in the workplace to support that initiative.
That's great. We are trying to have more opportunities to have people on here to talk about menopause. One of the episodes later last year, we had Chris Hendren, who is a 60-year-old female physique athlete, come on and talk about, and one of the biggest emphasis was her challenges with menopause and working toward becoming a physique athlete later in life. I mean, she didn't start it young.
Right.
And my wife's been on me a lot too. It's like, you need to discuss menopause. And so, okay. So if you have other guests for us, feel free to send them our way. And as we kind of wrap up, how can listeners kind of connect with you? We'll certainly leave any links within the description notes, but
Sure. Well, again, they can go to our website, midday.health, to learn more, midday.health. They can download the Midday app from the App Store, and they are certainly welcome to email me, Ann at midday.health. Always love to hear from women who are on this journey.
Great. Well, we thank you for being on the show, and we hope that this will help not only you, but other people to age well.
Oh, absolutely.
Thank you for listening. I hope you benefited from today's podcast, and until next time, keep aging well. If you have topics you would like to have us discuss on the Aging Well podcast, please click on the links in the episode description to send us a text or record your message or comments. We'd love to hear from you and how we can help you age well. If you benefit from the Aging Well podcast and would like to support the content financially, please click on the Support the Show link or support our affiliates and advertisers.